Heads to the Hill this morning. The Fed chair will testify before the House Financial Services Committee. Our next guest leads that hearing. Jeb Hensarling of Texas is chairman of the committee. And welcome, Chairman. Maybe we'll get to the news from yesterday at the end. But I mean, this is we just had some market watchers say this is really what the market cares about at this point, even though there was some volatility yesterday on the email stuff. But let's talk about Yellen. What's your first question? Or what do you think is most important to hear from her?
Well, I'd like to know exactly what type of policy normalization path are we actually on. So I'm encouraged at what I see the FOMC doing. I think that one of the great but-for causes of the last financial crisis was keeping rates too low too long. Let's hope it's not a contributing factor to the next. I also want to understand what's going to happen to the size and composition of the balance sheet. And will interest on excess reserves continue to be essentially the main monetary policy tool? Because this is not your father's monetary policy. This is not your father's Fed, and we are in uncharted territory. And I think that we've kept, again, potentially rates too low too long, and I'm concerned about a Fed that may be actually crossing the line between monetary policy and fiscal policy, specifically credit allocation, by their position in mortgage-backed security. So I really want to hear a lot about, are we indeed on a path to policy normalization? Because ultimately what we really have to count on is fiscal policy, and that has to do with health care and tax reform that Congress is working on.
Not everyone thinks that way, though, Mr. Chairman. We had Mark Grant on earlier. If you watch the show, you're familiar with him. But he says normalization, if you look at the rest of the world, normalization is much easier than we are right here. And if you look at it where inflation is at this point, and you look at the other metrics, we're not rip-roaring higher where, the brakes necessarily need to be tapped. There are some people that think we ought to be staying where we are and not raising interest rates at this point. I mean, maybe the jury's still out. If we had raised 2 or 3 years ago like a lot of people wanted, maybe that wasn't the right move. Maybe it was. I don't know.
Well, had we had higher rates prior to 2008, we might have not had the crisis. That's the other side of the coin as well.
But we did have an 8-year sort of hangover where maybe lower rates were actually the salve that we actually needed to bring about this recovery.
Well, again, I think that there are limits to what monetary policy can achieve. I mean, ultimately, we are talking about the supply of money. What we're not talking about necessarily is productivity and innovation and the things that will happen when we pass fundamental tax reform, and hopefully when the Senate finally passes a health care bill, because we know what a burden Obamacare has been upon our economy.
Yeah, so we hope that gets done. And any thoughts on this reports about Gary Cohn and whether or not he would be, in your opinion, a good Fed chair? On the one hand, somebody who's very involved in the markets, understands directly what you're talking about, whether or not the Fed inflated assets to an unnecessary degree and to a dangerous degree by keeping money low. At the same time, he worked in an investment bank, a trader. He might like low interest rates the same way a real estate person might like low interest rates. Any thoughts on Gary Cohn as potentially running the Fed?
Listen, I know him. I think he's an incredibly smart individual. I think he serves the president well. I think there are a number of people who could be highly qualified to be our next Fed chairman. I don't see any reason why Gary Cohn might be one of them. He's a very, very impressive individual. I've had a number of meetings with him, but there's a lot of other impressive individuals. John Taylor from Stanford is an individual who is very impressive as well, who could serve in that role. But ultimately, that's the president's call. It's not my call. And again, I think there's a number of candidates who could serve our nation well in that role. And I look forward to it because the president needs to fill these positions on the Fed. But again, I hope that we get a Fed that will give us a more predictable strategy-based policy where, frankly, you may not want to have me on future programs because hopefully monetary policy will be operating more silently in the background.
I'm sure we'll always be having you on, Chairman, either way. And just to switch focus, what was your reaction yesterday to the President's son's release of those infamous emails?
Well, I don't know the details of this. Listen, we have got at least a half a dozen different investigations that are going on. This is worthy of the investigation. I don't know what went on, but we need to get to the bottom of it. On the one hand, I know that opposition research is something all campaigns do. Why you're necessarily talking to a foreign state, obviously that's disturbing, but I don't completely know. I haven't read all the emails, but I have no doubt that the investigations that are ongoing will get to the bottom of it.
Did it worry you when you saw the market react to it? Did you think it was something that could derail momentum in the economy?
Well, no. I mean, I've been around long enough to see momentary swings in the market. So, no, I'm not. I'm more concerned, again, about ultimately getting tax reform done, because nothing says economic growth quite like tax reform. I wish some Democrats would help us to get that done.
Do you or any of your conservative colleagues have a problem with leaving the Obamacare taxes in the what if they do that in the Senate and goes back to the House? Is that going to be the final bill?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, there's certainly a problem by leaving the incredible imposition of taxes on the economy. It's one of the things that's dragging down economic growth today. But like every other member of Congress, I reserve the right to actually read and review the bill, so I'm anxious to see what they're going to be able to produce. And I hope we get to see something soon. Again, we've gotten our job done in the House, and now we're waiting on those behind me on the other side of the Capitol to get their job done. But no, it would not be a good sign to see those taxes remain in the bill.
You haven't made any plans for August, hopefully, because, I mean, don't you think you guys, I mean, God, of course, the senators, how do you tell whether they're on vacation or recess?
I'm not touching that one,
Jeff. Them, they don't even notice, but it might. Are you going to extend the time you work? Do you think the House will end up following suit?
As soon as they get their bill done, I'm